Bitcoin has been faring a lot better than a lot of traditional finance assets, and this has many people wondering, has it finally decoupled itself from the rest of global financial markets? But more on that in a second. Welcome to Cryptocurrents, your weekly podcast of people working in crypto talking about crypto so that you don't have to read a whole bunch of nonsense on crypto. No FOMO here, no shilling. Just everything that you need to know to be better equipped to navigate all things blockchain. Think of us like your personal Charlie's Angels. We're out here fighting, doing missions, while you just get to sit back and be Charlie and talk on a microphone. And I guess, we played by Bill Murray in the movie. Oh, shit, sorry.
That was a stretch.
Wow. That was a real stretch.
I know.
Especially because we're the ones speaking into microphones.
You're right. You're right.
They're listening to us speak into microphones.
Yeah.
We're three Charlies.
We are three Charlies.
We are three Charlies. They are out there
being the loosey-loos,
scrapping around, and we're giving them their margin. No, that doesn't work either.
It's been a day. I'm your host, Vince, and today I am joined by people you've already heard from before. We've got Kale from the Encrypt team and Brian from my Ether wallet.
Hello.
So besides busting my balls about my intro, which I felt like I was working really hard at, and I could have gotten through, I could have landed that if you just didn't give me that look.
I believe you.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you believe me. Mm-hmm. But we'll talk about Bitcoin in a bit. But before we do that, I want to talk about Tron is the latest crypto that is filed for an ETF. And currently, as of when we were doing our research for this show, there are 72 crypto-related ETF filings that are waiting for approval. And I just got to know, when is this going to stop? Like, this feels like absolute bananas to me that it's every single crypto thing is now going to be filing for an ETF. And I don't know why all of these keep making headlines, because it's so woefully uninteresting to me. And I just kind of want to get your gut check on this, Kale. As a new person, what do you think about all these ETFs?
I mean, every week I'm surprised that another ETF is announced, because I thought it was just going to be Bitcoin and Ethereum for like a while, but apparently not. So at this point, I feel like probably the major ones, so to speak, so like Solana, XRP, and Tron, I can see those passing. Who knows when? Maybe within like the next couple years, probably. But looking at the 72 ETFs that are on the table right now, there's a Pangu ETF, which is the Pudgy Penguins meme coin. There's a 2x Melania ETF, 2x Trump ETF, which is Trump and Melania's meme coins leveraged. So it's like, I don't know, dude. I feel like a couple of them are going to pass. And then the rest, like 99% of them are just not going anywhere. It feels like projects are just shooting their shot at this point. They're like, oh, well, they applied. Well, let's apply. YOLO.
Yeah, it feels kind of like back in the day during like the ICO boom where every ICO was like, we're going to do this. And first thing we got to do is get on Wikipedia. I remember that being a big deal back in the day. And this just kind of feels like something on a checklist where they're like, oh, yes, this will help us make token price go up. What are your thoughts?
I imagine this is a similar vibe to companies just getting a website in 2000. It's like, oh, we got a crypto ETF. Pump the price.
I guess so. Brian, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I agree. I think it's funny that you led this with this. These feel really uninteresting to me. Let's kick off the show with it.
Because I like negativity.
Yeah, it's like it can only go up from here in terms of excitement. Yes, it's another day, another ETF filing, and I agree. It's not a particularly interesting thing. I thought that I do think that them trying to push people keep trying to push the staked assets thing now with the new the new guard moving in at the SEC. Everyone wants to try their hand again. Is like, oh, can we give people exposure to staked assets? And I guess that's a little bit interesting that we're doing this. We're going to do this dance again. But I think that the concerns or regulatory concerns around staked assets make sense based on current securities laws. So it's not a terribly interesting debate. Like, we can change those laws, and that's fine. We can do that. But as it stands right now, it seems fairly settled. So it's not an interesting debate either. And Tron, I mean,
Yeah, and I agree. Like, when I say it's not interesting, I think what's not interesting is Tron shooting their shot. What I think is interesting is how this has just become part of the playbook for crypto in general.
I think it's depressing. I don't think it's interesting. I think it's depressing because there is this idea, like, all of these coins are traded. They are all actively trading. And everybody's just kind of feeling like, well, they got to be in more places so we can pump it more.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because it needs to pump more. And, so we'll get, if it's in ETFs, it'll go into more conventional portfolios, and it'll be treated, your granddad will be able to buy it. And that's what we all want, right? Well, no, you have a protocol token. Like, Tron is a protocol token, and its main use case right now, I think its main claim to fame right now is that it's great for, like, the settlement for stablecoins. Well, the more you pump that coin, the less effective it is for settlement for stablecoins. It's like an alternative to Ethereum right now, which I think is in the number one spot. It's an alternative to Ethereum right now because it's cheaper.
Yep.
But if it stops being cheaper, then it stops being useful.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It just kind of does feel back. This will always kind of remind me of that great quote that Katya had saying, all we have right now is kind of like tokenomics as a service. And this just kind of feels much more like that, where it's like how to get number up, not how do you build and do something very useful. But yeah, and I think it also shows like how kind of drab some of the media is when they're like, Tron is the new ETF. And it's like, this is all we have to talk about right now? That's crazy. Well, you know what else we have to talk about? And Brian set me up with a great segue as well. Circle, which I believe I read last night, outside of doing my research, actually delayed their IPO once again, is working on a new payments and settlements remittance layer for stablecoins, specifically looking to do cross-border payments and kind of getting back to their roots, which is interesting because I think it's them trying to shape the narrative around something that they're like, oh, well, we can do this and not just move prices, we promise. Brian, we've had a lot of talks about remittance and stuff of that nature and stablecoins. What's your kind of gut check on this? Is this just like them panicking for PR, or tell me more about your thoughts?
I mean, there's possibly a little bit of that. I mean, this market cycle thus far has not been an ideal time to be a digital asset provider trying to do an IPO. And as as an issuer, they have sort of been moved into the corporate face of what crypto is, particularly in America. And so for them to go very, very hard on cross-border payments and remittances is, I think, probably a strong move, because it is one of the old school use cases. This was something that has been talked about since I entered the space, was stablecoins, cross-border remittance, instant settlement, all of these things, like improving upon international banking rails, in a way that crypto is really primed to do. And so I think that them going hard into that narrative works. It's also a much more crowded field now, though. This is like we've talked about, like you said, we've talked about this a lot. Like stable coins are the use case that has caught. Like no matter what the market conditions, stablecoin adoption worldwide trends upward, and I think so. I think that I do think it's I think it's a good move. I think it's a positive move, but I also don't think that it's like unexpected or necessarily ground shaking that they would do this. This is what they should be doing. This is the kind of stuff that they should be doing.
Yeah, isn't this what XRP was trying to do in like 2018?
I feel like XRP has been trying to do that for many, many years now. With what was the what is the MoneyGram? MoneyGram, right?
I don't know, like,
or was that Stellar?
You're thinking of Stellar.
Okay.
That's XLM.
Got it. Kale, what do you think about this?
But that's also what I mean. That's what I mean. Like there are people doing this, and they're doing this along the line, like with like very like sort of like conventional rails. Like MoneyGram is used across Central America. There's a lot of like MoneyGram is known. A couple of years ago, XRP was in the field. Now Stellar's in the field. Now you have all of these issuers. Everybody wants to issue a stable coin. Everybody wants to do cross-border remittance. So they're the biggest player, and so I'm glad that they're doing this. But,
Yeah. I don't even know what a remittance network is. But from reading the article, from what I understand, their ultimate goal is to basically rival Visa and MasterCard, which is, if that's what they're trying to do, just chef's kiss. Love to see it. Because, yeah, I mean, from the way I look at it, it's just more decentralization. It's like we can live in a world where it's only MasterCard and Visa, or we can live in a world where it's MasterCard and Visa and Circle and this guy and that guy and that guy. So the more the merrier, in my eyes. It's cool to see.
I do want to see, this is funny, like you talking about Visa and MasterCard, made me think of like Discover, right? Who is not accepted like anywhere. And like when I was a kid, I remember American Express was not accepted in very many places. And I'm just like, oh yeah, like we like to pretend there's a lot of like providers, but there's not. And it's kind of really just Visa. So I don't know if Visa's...
Well, Discover was just, aren't they merging? Aren't they being acquired by Capital One?
Yeah, they are.
So, yeah, maybe you'll be able to use your Discover card now.
I mean, thankfully it's not mine. It's just my dumb wife. And every time she's like, can I have one of your other credit cards? I'm like, yes, dear. Here you go.
When I was in college, the only credit card that was accepted for tuition payments was Discover.
Really?
And I didn't know anybody who had a Discover card. And then, like, my first week on campus, their tables were all over the place. Like, sign up for a Discover card.
I mean, you get that captive audience, and then you're set, man.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is this really segues nicely into my next topic, which is about banking and how, as we see changes in the regulatory space, we see a lot of providers like Coinbase and BitGo looking to actually attain banking licenses. And Brian, like, you're our go-to guy for like regulatory space and like the very high level macro things. Is this interesting? Is this good? Is this kind of getting away from our roots, or is this just kind of a stopgap given the current political climate?
It's certainly getting away from our roots, but it's also, again, it's not a particularly new tactic.
Right.
There's a lot of projects, now defunct projects, that I won't mention by
Tell us,
name.
Grandpa. Tell us, Grandpa.
Well, back in my day,
What was the crypto Great Depression like?
after the old ICO boom went bust, we were all out there shaking our empty wallets, asking for a handout. Well, but anyway, that wasn't going anywhere. But anyway,
Those are the best
I mean,
ones.
lots of this was a tactic that people would they were like, oh, we'll buy a bank, we'll buy a local bank, then we'll have we'll have the licenses we need as a money services provider. And it was a kind of a, it was an old tactic. Most of those projects didn't necessarily have any aspirations beyond being a crypto bank, though. Like, they wanted to bank crypto projects, and that's really what they wanted, because at the time everybody was being debanked for one reason or another by the major banking players. So it's not new. And I think it makes a certain degree of sense. I mean, certain regulation that has been introduced over the years has required that, like, a stablecoin issuer have a banking license. So if you want to issue a stablecoin in the U.S., you would need a banking license. Now, I don't know where we are with any of that, but it does seem like one of those ways by which people are going to be able, are looking to give themselves a little bit of cover as they move forward. But again, these are not going to be, your cypherpunk projects. These are not going to be, your big privacy protocols. These are not going to be people who are kind of pushing the envelope in terms of the technology anyway. These are digital asset providers, probably exchanges who are looking to potentially expand into expand their offerings, their TradFi offerings, so they can compete on the levels of like the Revoluts and the Robinhoods of the world. I could see that. I could see that happening. But it's not going to be your non-custodial maxis.
So, question then from the history books, you mentioned a bunch of projects that tried to do this and then went defunct. Was it just because they were too narrow in their scope of like, oh, we just want to be a bank for crypto people? Or was there more to it that is going to be a similar pitfall for this again?
I don't know, because that happened during like relatively poor market conditions as well. Okay. Like this was a tack that a lot of folks after the ICO boom, where you had a lot of money, you had pools of capital that came into the space all of a sudden, and nobody really had anything to do with it, and there were no projects. Like the projects were all funded, but there was still nothing to do but trade coins around. There was no real other utility, and so this was possibly...
Sounds very much like right now, a little bit.
It sounds a little bit like right now. It sounds... Yeah. Obviously, we have a lot more to do right now, and I think a little bit of that capital has been, it's spread over like a wider range of projects. But yeah, we're in this sort of down market, this period of uncertainty where there isn't a dominant narrative that we see like that's going to drive value in this space for the next year to 2 years. We're not there yet. And so, yeah, like I would say that this is a little bit similar.
Kale, what are your feelings on this? Are you just like, boo?
Yeah,
boo,
dude, kind of.
Don't do that.
The idealistic me is like, no, down with the banks. Why are we doing this? But yeah, I mean, the realistic me is like, well, I mean, what did you expect? It's not like some crew of crypto nerds were actually gonna overthrow the banking cartel. So I don't know. You got to take what you get, but it does kind of feel like if you can't beat them, join them type vibe, But yeah, I don't know. If we are to ever like create a completely new financial system that like doesn't rely on banks at all, like that does take time anyway. So it's like maybe that's still possible in the future, but things like this are kind of bittersweet to me.
Interesting, because I mean, before you've been like excited by some of crypto growing up, but apparently this is crypto growing up in the wrong way.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like I don't want them to get their license.
Yeah, dude. As long as it's good, if it's good,
drive
if it's good for
illegally.
my bags, then it's good for the industry, obviously.
Okay. Well, then let's talk about your bags. Let's talk about Bitcoin. So, over the last few weeks in market conditions, we've seen a lot of crypto get cut off at the knees, as well as the NASDAQ, the Dow, most global financial markets having a rough time of it. But Bitcoin is one thing that we've actually seen some resilience in. And as things have been bouncing back a little bit, we've seen Bitcoin doing that quite well as well, which kind of is good because it shows a decoupling of Bitcoin, maybe, I don't know, from the rest of the traditional markets. Kale, talk to me about Bitcoin. What are your thoughts?
Honestly, I think that if Bitcoin had a decoupling era, it was in like 2010, like in the first few years. I think that over time, if anything, Bitcoin will become more and more correlated to the stock market. Because like in the beginning, stock market would go up a few percent, Bitcoin would go up 1,000%, and then stock market drops a few percent, and then Bitcoin drops 100%. It's like, and then over time, it's like that has gotten tighter. It's correlating more and more over time. So I feel like that trend will continue. What's happening now is probably an anomaly. As like where stock market is performing much worse. But yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Brian looked like he was about to fight you on that. Fight him, Brian.
I wasn't going to fight him, but I do think. I mean, but what you're talking about, while that's true, that's not decoupled. Like those, it's just like the
Inverse.
stock market goes. It's like it's an amplified reaction, but it's still, it's still in step. It used to be a few years back, like we calculated as like, oh well, ETH will go ETH has been performing about like 2 to 5% in lockstep with the S&P 500. Now that's not really true anymore, but it's still you can still you can create those kind of like rough heuristics when you're trying to like map what's if map how the asset's going to perform. I think what's interesting over the last few days, in particular, and weeks, is that Bitcoin did decouple. Like stock market go down, Bitcoin go up. And that's new. And it's always interesting when the old narratives, and this is the oldest narrative. This is the oldest narrative in crypto, is that Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation. It is a hedge. It is a hedge against the performance of the market. And this is an example, one of the very few examples where you've actually seen this in the macro environment. You're actually seeing this. You're seeing Bitcoin hold its ground relative to the market, and I think that's really, really interesting, because it doesn't only mean because it's not like I don't know that it's a victory for crypto exactly. What I think it is that it's the understanding that unlike altcoins, like Bitcoin has been battle tested, and it's the best performing asset, like
of all time.
Like
Yep.
nothing compares to it. Like nothing compares to it, and people are now seeing that as a safe haven, as opposed to a crypto liability, the way crypto's volatility has always been seen. And that's a really, really interesting development. And what it's going to mean for the rest of the ecosystem, I think is hard to predict. Because right now we have sort of like this sort of cubic zirconium effect that's happening with like the rest of crypto, where it's like, Bitcoin's really expensive, I'm going to throw it into ETH, which is one of the reasons why ETH has traditionally fallen within lockstep in Bitcoin, even though they're not really terribly related in terms of functionality. So I think but like how that's going to perform long term, I don't know. But I do think that this is only good. This might be short term how Bitcoin's performing, but I don't think that this is the last time. I think this is the first. This is the start of a possibly a long term recontextualization of Bitcoin in the minds of investors.
I'll fight you a little bit on that.
All
So
right.
I think that the only reason that it has not been like chopped off at the knees and then is like done okay is only because the current markets are suffering because of Trump's tariffs. And I think that there is an understanding of some people that you can't tariff crypto. And so these downward effects that these tariffs are having on the NASDAQ, the Dow, all of that, have some downward effect on Bitcoin, but just kind of the natural people buying of Bitcoin hasn't really changed. And so I don't know if this is like a narrative that will continue. I have a feeling they'll go back in a kind of lockstep. I think this decoupling is just because of these tariffs and the current like kangaroo market that we have going on.
I don't disagree. I think that the question is whether or not the tariffs are going away.
True.
And to what extent are they going to go away? Like
What day of the week is it? And I'll tell you.
And then if all of the tariffs are unraveled, what comes next?
Yeah.
I think it's very important to remember that the new regulatory environment that we are currently in, the new economic environment that we are currently in, is not yet fully 4 months old.
Jesus, yeah. It feels like 10 years.
Such a good way to put it.
And so this is the beginning of the tumult. It's not the end of it, and it's not going to be the only tumult. So I think that's going to be the main. That's going to be the main test. Like we are dispensing economic policy using a wheel with a little pin on it. We're using a pinwheel. That's what I was. Pinwheel. A wheel with a pin.
Right.
Is a pinwheel. We're using a pinwheel to determine what economic policy we do, what tariffs we put on, what we roll off, and that level of we have financial advice apparently coming straight from the White House.
Buy the dip.
And it's like we are and this has just begun, and so I think that if Bitcoin continues to move through this tumult, these different types of disruptions to business as usual on Wall Street and like stock markets across the world, if Bitcoin rides that, then it's going to come out of this a very different asset than when it went in.
How close does gold correlate to the stock market? Like, would you consider gold decoupled?
Well, so typically the stock market goes down, gold goes up because people are like, oh no, I need my precious metals because when my dollar goes to zero, I can use the gold as bartering.
So gold is
they're
decoupled.
They're correlated, like they're just inverse.
I see. Okay, I think I'm getting confused with the term.
Unless I just got that wrong.
Well, I don't know if they're going to use it for bartering so much.
They
usually don't receive the gold.
I know.
But
well, if the stock market goes to zero, better find the gold somewhere.
Yeah. Like they're not. It doesn't just go up because it's a bunch of gold bugs like buying doubloons and burying them in the backyard. Thank you for letting me say doubloons. I want to say it every single time I'm on this podcast.
Perfect. But typically they use it as a hedge against markets going down. Like you see precious metals go up.
And the narrative of Bitcoin being digital gold is the old, that old narrative, but it really hasn't been.
Yeah.
It really hasn't behaved exactly like that.
Oh, we're going into interesting, chaotic times where we don't know what's going to happen one day to the next. But you know what will happen week over week? This podcast. Because we've reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you being here. Make sure you like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps. Thank you to both my guests for being here today, and we'll see you in the next week.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye.